Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates, and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's Zola.com.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host and or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of the host and or Paranormal Buzz Radio and or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is prohibited. Paranormal Buzz Radio will not be held responsible for you holding your knees, crying, and rocking in a corner in a puddle of your own urine, or being beheaded by a group of children in a cornfield. In fact, if you come across a group of children in a cornfield, we promise to make fun of you as you run away screaming in terror. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to RAP Paranormal and Friends with your hosts,
Kim Purvis
and Alison Robinson. Make sure to check us out on our Facebook pages, RAP Paranormal and Friends and RAP Paranormal Busters, for up-to-date show information and events. Hello everyone, welcome to RAP Paranormal and Friends. We have a special guest joining us, Dona Masi. Now before we get into this, we're going to be talking about her new book, The Taking. But before we get into that, let me just give you a little bit of background on our special guest. Dona is a writer and an editor whose short fiction and articles are used in reading and writing assessments throughout the United States. Her articles about the art, environment, and current affairs have appeared in Foster's Daily Democrat, Seacoast Newspaper, and Portsmouth Press. She's also a playwright, so she's had 2 of her plays have been performed at the Provincetown Theater Company. Also with her fiction, and as in her playwriting, she loves bringing relatable characters to life and depicting them in all their heroic and flawed humanity. Her debut novel, The Taking, was inspired by her interest in UFO folklore and reports of alien encounters. With a BA in Liberal Studies from Vermont College, she earned her MA in Liberal Studies from the University of New Hampshire. So, welcome, Dona. How are you?
Good. Thank you for having me, Alison.
Yes.
It's great to be here.
Absolutely. I'm glad we finally were able to connect here. Now, your book, The Taking, I have to say, I could barely put it down. It was very, very good.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
I'm really into UFOs and abductions and things of that nature as well. And so I want to know, how did you get interested in UFOs, in abductions, and things of that nature?
Yeah. Well, it really goes back all the way to my childhood. Um, I, my mom was interested in them,
Hmm.
and so that probably rubbed off on me. We used to talk about them a lot.
Uh-huh.
Being from New Hampshire too, it's a hot spot for UFO activity, as are many places in the country and around the world.
Hmm.
And we've had our fair share of kind of famous incidents of legend.
Hmm.
And so those two things I was really aware of, like certain famous stories in UFO history from New Hampshire and around the country.
Hmm.
And when I was a little kid, I saw something, and I think it's hard to tell whether I really saw something or whether it
Hmm.
was a dream at this point or my
Hmm.
imagination. But it stuck with me
Hmm.
all these years.
Wow.
And sort of, I'm sure that might have been a spark for my interest too.
Hmm.
Then I always was reading books about UFOs and watching things on television, documentaries, etc.
Hmm.
Not only about UFOs, but about the paranormal in general. I was just
Oh,
really
okay.
interested
Uh-huh.
in it too. So I kind of gravitated to any kind of literature that was the topic. And so just kind of learned more and more about it. And, I often look on the MUFON website, the
Hmm.
Mutual UFO Network,
Hmm.
and for reports all over,
Right.
in New Hampshire too, because of course they have state organizations everywhere as
Hmm.
well.
Hmm.
And so my interest in UFOs kind of led me to, as I said, research the topic on my own, kind of informally.
Hmm.
Um, but when I was in grad school, I took an anthropology class, and our assignment was we had to write, research a paper about a culture other than our own.
Hmm.
So I talked my professor into letting me write about UFO folklore,
Uh-huh.
and which, he was kind of, well, is that really your culture? And I said, well, yeah, it is.
Yeah.
So anyway, I talked him into it, and that led me to write, like a 30-page research paper
Oh, wow.
about alien abductions, and so I talked with witnesses, I talked
Hmm.
with investigators, ufologists, a folklorist, a UFO folklorist, and that was really interesting. And I ended up writing the paper.
Hmm.
One of the books I read, and one of the books that I read was by John Mack, the psychiatrist from Harvard. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but
I don't think
back
I
in the
know him.
80s and 90s, he treated almost 100 people who were suffering from, trauma
Hmm.
and fear, and they seemed to have some kind of base in paranormal experiences.
Okay.
And, some of them had an inkling about what was going on, some of them had no clue,
Hmm.
but through his treatment with these patients, the conclusion seemed to be that a lot of them were experiencers of UFO phenomenon, either seeing things or actual abduction experiences. And Dr. Mack was a skeptic, open-minded
Hmm.
skeptic, but after treating patients for several years, he kind of became a really outspoken believer in them. So he kind of became one of the faces of this is a real phenomenon. And he was highly criticized for it, as many people are who come forward with
Hmm.
these stories.
Right.
And they're just told it's their imagination, or they're just being sensationalists, or they're
Hmm.
out for attention, etc.
Right.
So all of the allegations that are, thrown
Hmm.
at people. And he is very controversial, and remains so to this day.
Hmm.
And he kind of went, I don't want to digress too much, but one of the things that he did was go to Tanzania
Hmm.
to talk with young kids at a school who had a group encounter during their recess. And so he interviewed many witnesses at the school.
Hmm.
And this was back in 1996. So there's a great documentary about it on Netflix that I watched. I can't remember what it was called, but anyway. So he really pursued it hot and heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read his book, it was the first time it ever occurred to me that while this is really a story about human beings,
Mm-hmm.
not just aliens.
Right.
I mean, because if it's all true,
Mm-hmm.
there are real people that are being affected by this.
Right.
And these experiences are really scary and traumatic, and people don't know what to do. They don't have any control over what's happening to them if they're abductees. They don't know if they'll have another one, when it's going to come.
Mm-hmm.
And on top of that, they're often isolated because they don't want to share their experiences, fearing that they won't be believed or they'll
Right.
be mocked. So he really gave me food for thought.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, I think, when I began to, at least subconsciously, have the idea to write a novel about it. Being a writer, I found it to be a real dramatic topic that had potential to be emotional, suspenseful, and I didn't get my ideas for the book directly from him.
Mm-hmm.
The story at all, of course, and my story is fiction.
Right.
But at the same time, some of the themes do come
Mm-hmm.
from what I gained from reading Dr. Mack's writing.
That was one of my questions. With your book, it's The Taking, and it's about a man and his daughter whose wife had mysteriously disappeared when Vera, who's the daughter, was born, and she's having all these unexplained things happen to her. And so I was wondering, with your book, you said that some of it was kind of based off of that, but with all your research and everything that you've done, do you think that's kind of where you've got your inspiration to write this book?
Oh yeah, for sure. And a lot of the detail, well, I should say all the details about what Vera goes through, and I mean, they're really gathered from research that I've done, all the reading and what I've learned about the characteristics of an abduction experience, the actual abduction and what happens, as it's occurring, and also the feelings, the emotions that abduction victims go through. So yes, definitely it was. I relied on or drew from the research that I had done.
Now, besides what you thought, you said you possibly may have had like an experience seeing something when you were younger. Now, within your research, do you know anybody like specifically like that you're close to, or a friend or anything that's had some kind of encounter with some unexplained being?
Well, yes, I've met a couple of people who say that they are abduction, alien abductees, and also people who have seen strange things and have had multiple sightings. So yes, definitely. Acquaintances, plus I sought people out when I was writing my research paper for my course and spoke with them. And then when I told people that I know what I was doing, writing a research paper, and I was looking for people to talk to, well, then I had people that I didn't know, that I knew, that I didn't know had experience. Tell me about that.
Oh, wow.
Tell me about them. They said, don't use my name.
Yeah, right.
I'm not going to do that anyway.
Right.
But they just wanted to be clear that they didn't want to, they wanted to be anonymous.
Right.
So yeah, I have. And
do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates, and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's Zola.com.
Big shout out to you for making it through the hectic holiday season. This new year, get clean, quality, pregnancy nutrient support off your to-do list, including Ritual's best-selling Essential Prenatal Multivitamin, designed with 12 traceable key ingredients to support a healthy pregnancy. With big changes coming up, take the small steps now and start today with 30% off a 3-month supply at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
Researchers too that I spoke to, like I spoke to some MUFON investigators, and I also had a long conversation with Kathleen Marden, who's a ufologist and pretty famous in the field too. She's the niece of Betty and Barney Hill, who had an alien abduction encounter in New Hampshire. That's one very famous story back in 1961, and Kathy was like 13 or so when that occurred, and she was a primary source for that, because she lived through all of that with Betty and Barney.
Wow.
And in her family, they've not only she's since come forward after many years of kind of being silent, to say that she herself was an experiencer and other people in her family were. So that was an amazing conversation to hear all about the Hill case and some of Kathleen's experiences too. So yeah, I got an opportunity to talk to a lot of people.
Wow. Now, besides that one that you just talked about, are there any other really interesting cases that you've read about or heard about or anything during your research?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, of course, there's the Travis Walton case, which is another one that's very famous, where he was abducted I think in Arizona. He was working on a logging crew, and they were coming back down off the mountain one night after working, and they saw a very bright light in the sky right over them, and they stopped, and Travis jumped out of the truck. For some reason, he was drawn to do that, and they were all, the rest of the guys were just panic-stricken. They're like, get back in the car, get back in the car. And then, I mean, it swept him up in this bright light, and he was abducted, and he was missing for, I think, 4 or 5 days. And then all of a sudden, his brother-in-law got a phone call and Travis didn't have any memory of what had happened at the time. Later, I guess the details started coming to him. The guys he was with were actually suspected of killing him.
Oh, wow.
And they all took lie detector tests. They passed. So pretty soon their stories were so consistent. So pretty soon, they were no longer suspects, but of course the police had a hard time believing their stories at first. I was watching a documentary about it, just a few days ago, about the Travis Walton case, and they said some research said there might be physical proof now up at the site of his abduction, and that was 50 years ago.
Oh, wow.
That was recently discovered, or in the last 10 years or something, meaning that, I think, let's see if I can remember it correctly, that the trees around the area, or in the area where the abduction take place, are filled with radioactivity, and they have accelerated growth compared to the other trees that were right outside
the
immediate area. And when they chopped the trees down, they saw that the rings, to indicate that there was a lot more growth, that the rings were really wide. You know how the trees grow faster and faster, the rings get wider. So there were interesting things there that they've discovered at this site.
Oh, wow.
So who knows, but that's pretty cool. So that story, there's another interesting one from New Hampshire
Mm-hmm.
about this, and this was a long ago too.
Mm-hmm.
It's called the incident at Exeter. And actually, Exeter, New Hampshire, has a UFO festival every year in
Oh,
Labor
wow.
Day weekend to commemorate it or remember it, you know.
Oh, that'd be
And
cool.
but this young guy was hitchhiking, and it
Mm-hmm.
was late one night, and he saw a spaceship or a spacecraft just kind of come right into the middle of the road and hover there in front of him, and just he was freaked out.
Mm-hmm.
And then it took off eventually. So he kind of like stood out in the middle of the road when the next car came by, waving his arms, screaming and yelling. He wanted to get out of there. Car gave him a ride to the police station, and one of the officers there went out to the site with him to investigate,
Mm-hmm.
and the UFO showed up again.
Oh, wow.
Yes, it was witnessed by this police officer, and it was there. I mean, it was just there, and they were,
Mm-hmm.
and then the officer radioed for another officer to come too. The thing was still there, so they
Oh.
had two police officers and this young guy, and they witnessed it for like, I don't know, 15, 20 minutes before it took off, and then it just went zip right back into the sky, and
Mm-hmm.
poof, it was gone. You know.
Oh, wow.
So that's a really famous case.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, I mean, there's so many that are really interesting. I could go on and on.
Now, going back to the Betty and Barney Hill one, what of their story makes that so believable to you?
Well, there's a lot of, I mean, there were no other witnesses
Mhm.
to it, but there's a lot of information or details that sound pretty credible.
Mm-hmm.
When they got back home finally,
Mhm.
after they were on this trip from Canada back to their home in Portsmouth, and they were driving through the White Mountains of New Hampshire, they found these unusual markings on their back of their car, like big black spots.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, you know, Betty called her sister, who's Kathy Martin, her
Mhm.
mother, and told her about them. And for some reason, her sister said, "Well, do you have, get a compass or something?"
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why she said that, but at any rate, she did. And the compass was going crazy over these spots. And they called the local Air Force base. At the time, there was an Air
Mhm.
Force base around here. They sent out an officer to investigate. He used a Geiger counter. They were radioactive
Oh, wow.
spots. Betty had a new dress on,
Mm-hmm.
and that dress is actually an artifact at the University of New Hampshire, just down the road. They have an exhibit of artifacts from the case in their special collection library. So you can go and see these artifacts. But anyway, Betty had a dress on. The dress was all torn. It was a brand new dress. The zipper was ripped. It had a strange pink powder on it. When she got home that morning,
Mhm.
she took it off and put it in her closet, and it stayed there for like 40 years. They tested. Finally, she took
Mhm.
it to a scientist who tested it, and they could not identify any known substance to account for the coating of like this powder that was all over it.
Oh, wow.
And then there was also when she says they had so much, they started to have bad dreams
Mhm.
about something that happened to them,
Mm-hmm.
and all this anxiety. So they eventually went to a psychiatrist, and they were put under hypnosis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when a lot of the details of their stories came out. They didn't remember anything from when they were driving down the road after they'd seen the UFO until, you know, they had this lost time, and then they were driving down the road, and they had lost 2 hours, and they didn't know what happened.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So all of these details about their experiences, the whole abduction affair, came out during their hypnosis. Their stories were very consistent, the two of them.
Mm-hmm.
So there was that as well. and to make it sound really credible. I mean, you can argue that sometimes hypnosis is sketchy,
Mm-hmm.
but there was that. And then Betty, throughout her life, had more encounters, so she
Mm.
claims. I mean,
Wow.
Kathy has memories of going out with, they used to go looking for UFOs
Uh-huh.
because Betty always wanted to see them again.
Right.
And Kathy said that they saw them on sometimes when he's searching.
Mm-hmm.
So Betty felt like she was being sought out by them
Mm-hmm.
throughout her life. Um, there was one other thing I was going to say that was support all of this, but I can't remember what it was. But there were a load of different details like that. Oh, I know what I was going to say.
Mm-hmm.
When Betty was on board the craft, she she asked one of them, "Well, I want people to know what happened. And where are you in the universe?" So they gave her, there was a map, like a star map,
Mm-hmm.
and they gave her a copy of it. But she said that the other beings
Mm-hmm.
didn't want her to have the map, so they took it away from her. But later, under hypnosis, she recreated it.
Wow.
Well, it turns out that there were missing pieces in the map that
Mm-hmm.
astronomers couldn't account for. I mean, or that they couldn't account for what they saw on the map. So later on, probably about 10 years later, these certain sets of stars that were in the map were actually discovered by astronomers later on. So that there's that piece
Mm-hmm.
as well. Um, but it's known as like the first modern UFO abduction story
Wow.
in modern history.
Wow.
It's pretty, for me, it's a compelling story, as are
Oh
many
yeah.
others.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Now with reading about, different abduction stories and things of that nature, and with your research, is it pretty common for the abductees not to have any recollection really of what happened, or that they feel that they lost time?
Yeah, it is common. I mean, I don't know if there are exceptions to it. There may be,
Mm-hmm.
but yes, it is very common for them to have this sensation of lost time, and not know what happened to them, but have a sense that something did,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe not even recollect.
Do you know the number one thing that surprises engaged couples? Take a guess. The sheer amount of decisions they have to make while planning a wedding. Indoors or outdoors? How many guests? Are kids invited? Controversial. Which cake flavor? Seriously, how do you even begin to figure out what's right for you? That's where Zola comes in. Zola has everything you need to make every wedding decision a piece of cake, from choosing your dream wedding venue and vendors to deciding how to best spend your budget. With tons of customizable wedding websites, save the dates, and invites, every detail will feel like you. Zola will even help you choose the gifts, experiences, and cash funds you really want. The next thing you know, you've planned your whole wedding all in one place. From getting engaged to getting married, Zola has everything you need to plan your wedding in one place. Start planning at Zola.com. That's ZOLA.com.
Hey there. Ritual here to give a big shout out to you for making it through the hectic holiday season. The magic of those family moments, that was you. And now there's new milestones to prep for in 2025. This new year, check clean, quality pregnancy nutrient support off your to-do list with Ritual. We've done the research to create science-backed pregnancy support like our prenatal multivitamin, natal choline, and fertility support, all designed to be taken alongside each other. But don't just take our word for it. They're also third-party tested for microbes and heavy metals and Clean Label Project certified. So whether you're trying, thinking about trying, or already there, we don't have to tell you that prioritizing yourself can be the hardest part. That's why we're helping you get started today with 30% off a 3-month supply for a limited time at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
But have subconscious impact of the experience.
Mm-hmm.
Nightmares like Betty and Barney did. That's pretty common. And things coming back slowly to them, even if they don't go under hypnosis, but remembering bits and pieces,
Mm-hmm.
but not being able to put it all together.
Right.
And then oftentimes times eventually they put things together, and it comes breaking through from their subconscious mind into their conscious memory, and there it stays. When I had my experience as a kid, I mean, I was only like 7, second grade, I had a sense that I had missing time from that experience too.
Right.
I don't think that I had an abduction experience, but I think I observed something.
Something.
Yeah. And, I mean, I looked up at it, and I saw it. It was like a cigar-shaped object in the sky. It looked to me like it had windows. I got the sensation that it was aware of me. It was looking at me. And I had a sensation of, I was conscious of some presence. And then I said to myself, and this line is in the book, but otherwise it's all fiction in the book. But I said to myself, that looks like a plane, but it doesn't have wings. And then I looked away from it for a second. And between when I was looking at it and looked away and then looked back at it, I had a sense of missing time.
Wow.
If you have, I don't know, you black out for a second, you know something that might have happened, but you don't know what it was.
Right.
Anyway, when I looked back up, I was just terrified. I was so scared that I just took off running and I ran back to school. When I got to the classroom, the teacher didn't even seem to notice me coming in late. There were no other kids in the playground at that point. It was because it was recess, but I was all alone. And I kept thinking, oh, the teacher's going to be mad at me because I'm late. Well, nobody noticed me coming in.
Wow.
Class. And when I went to my desk, and when I sat down, I forgot all about it. It was almost like that was a trigger moment where I forgot all about it. And then I didn't remember it for a long time. But then would come and go, the memory, come and go. And then finally one day I remembered it. And it's very clear. And I'm very sure that I'm not very sure. I can't say that, but I feel it may have been real.
Yeah. Right.
But there's no proof of it other than my memory.
Your memory and experience. What do you think their sole purpose is, extraterrestrials? What do you think their sole purpose is, for coming here?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I guess it depends on a couple of things. If you think that there are multiple species that are coming here, they could all have different motivations for it. Some people have reported having positive experiences with these visitors, and they're not, they may be afraid at first, but then eventually they feel like it's been a positive experience, and that they're teaching them something. And that and others are just feel that they're just negative, and they're scared of them, and they may be scared of them just because it's so weird and they don't want to accept what's going on, whether the beings' motivations are benevolent or malevolent, and others feel that they do have a dark agenda. I mean, of course, you probably heard all about, are they making human alien hybrids and stuff?
Right.
And why? Is that everybody? So I think it depends on who you ask. Me, I don't know. I tend to think that if one species has visited us, and if there must be other advanced civilizations that would have the same capacity to travel wherever they choose to, and their reasons for coming might be different than other species. And of course, there's people, when they have these encounters, they say, they look somewhat human, or they don't look human. They look like, they're gray, they have big eyes, slanty eyes, they have big mouths. Others say they're reptilian. I've heard some people say that the reptilians are no good. Right, yeah. They're dangerous, the grays are no good. So it's hard to say. Whether they're not, it's a scary thing for me to think about too. Right. Just because it would be so mind blowing to come face to face and say, "Oh my goodness," there's no doubt about it. Right. It's not hypothetical anymore. I've witnessed it,
Mm-hmm.
and I know this is real, and my mind is just blown,
Mm-hmm.
knowing that there's just all these alternate realities that we don't experience
Right.
commonly.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Now, with your book, do you think that readers will come away from reading it believing that UFOs and abductions are real?
Possibly, yeah. It. I don't know if I meant to convince anybody about anything,
Mm-hmm.
but I wanted to explore these questions
Right.
of the existence, and also what's the impact on people.
Mm-hmm.
So they very well may open their mind a little bit if they were skeptics to begin with. I think the idea of being abducted by aliens, whether you believe or not, is pretty darn scary and alarming. And anybody
Right.
a lot of people don't believe in vampires or
Mm-hmm.
werewolves, but the idea of it is pretty scary.
Scary. Right.
I would love it if people came away with it, considering the idea that that experiencers, this is really a profound experience on them,
Mm-hmm.
has a huge impact on their lives, and it's a lot to deal with.
Mm-hmm.
And so if somebody comes to them,
Right.
a good friend, and said, "Oh, you won't believe what happened to me, or can I tell you something, and you promise not to criticize me," that they would be maybe empathetic
Mm-hmm.
toward that, not necessarily dismiss it right away. Um,
Right. Absolutely. Excuse me. Sorry, I had a little tickle in my throat there. With your book, The Taking, it talks about abductions and things like that, but it also goes into the relationship between the daughter and the father and things of that nature. What do you hope that people take away from that aspect of it?
Well, in relation to like the UFO abduction experience, I want people to see how important it is to have people that support them
Mm-hmm.
if they're going through this, and there to believe them, because I think it can make all the difference
Mm-hmm.
in how somebody handles it. And they're, it's a frightening experience. It's very frightening for people who are close to those who are going through it, if they happen to know about it.
Mm-hmm.
And you need empathy. You need people to believe you. Even, of course, they can't control it. They can't stop it. There's
Right.
nothing they can. But you have the person who's going through that experience and abducting, and they're like, well, what do I do? How do I have a normal life?
Mm-hmm.
Given what I'm going through, with all the unpredictability and the weirdness of it all,
Mm-hmm.
and how do I deal with the fear and the anxiety that I have? So to have people in your life that love you and will support you in that
Mhm.
is important, because there's another character, not to give away too much,
Right.
who doesn't have that.
Mhm. Mm-hmm.
It's a totally different experience.
Right.
So I would like people to think about that. Like, that's definitely one of the central ideas
Mm-hmm.
in the book.
Where can your book, The Taking, be purchased?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's on Amazon. It's on Kindle, Barnes and Noble. It's on a lot of retail sites where books are sold. It also on my publisher's website, Collective Ink. You could find it there. You just have to, I think, just search for it, Dona Masi, The Taking, on their website. So it's up there for purchase too. And actually, the published release date in the United States is January 1st, so that's just in a few days.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
that's cool.
Yes.
And it had been in pre-launch for many months. It published in the UK in December, so I'm officially a published novelist now.
Yes.
But in the US, I will be so, and on January 1st. So it's kind of a cool way to start off the new year.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, I have a website. It's donamasi.com, DONAMASI.com, and I have a button there where you can order it too. It takes you right to Amazon to order it.
Perfect. Do you have any other social media or anything in case any of our listeners have any questions for you or want to talk to you about your book or anything of that nature?
Sure. On my website, there is a comment page, so you can leave a comment. And I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Facebook. Um, and I also I'm on Instagram.
Mhm.
I'm kind of getting started with the Instagram.
Graham? Okay.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I have an account, but I haven't done too much yet. But I am on Instagram. You just have to look for me. And so those are the best ways. I do have a TikTok, Twitter account, but I haven't been too active with that yet. I'm catching up with my social media. But LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, on my website, for sure.
Perfect. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Donna, for being on, and thank you to all of our listeners. Please go check out her book, The Taking. As of January 1st, it'll be published here in the U.S., so make sure you grab your copy of that. It is a truly wonderful book. I did really enjoy it thoroughly, so thank you very much for that, Donna. And thank you for being on the show and presenting us with this book and your information and knowledge on UFOs and alien abductions. It was truly a pleasure to have you.
It was fun. Thank you so much. I love being here.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Until next time.
Bye-bye.
Hey there. Ritual here to give a big shout out to you for making it through the hectic holiday season. The magic of those family moments, that was you. And now there's new milestones to prep for in 2025. This new year, check clean, quality pregnancy nutrient support off your to-do list with Ritual. We've done the research to create science-backed pregnancy support like our prenatal multivitamin, natal choline, and fertility support, all designed to be taken alongside each other. But don't just take our word for it. They're also third-party tested for microbes and heavy metals and Clean Label Project certified. So whether you're trying, thinking about trying, or already there, we don't have to tell you that prioritizing yourself can be the hardest part. That's why we're helping you get started today with 30% off a 3-month supply for a limited time at ritual.com/podcast. These statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration. This product is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease.
How to have fun, anytime, anywhere. Step 1. Go to ChumbaCasino.com.
ChumbaCasino.com. Got it.
Step 2. Collect your welcome bonus.
Come to Papa welcome bonus.
Step 3. Play hundreds of casino-style games for free.
That's a lot of games. All for free?
Step 4. Unleash your excitement.
Woohoo!
Chumba Casino has been delivering thrills for over a decade. So claim your free welcome bonus now and live the Chumba life. Visit ChumbaCasino.com. VGW Group. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. See terms and conditions. 18+.